Exposed: How I Transformed a Resign Threat into 5 Incredible Patents, a Hidden Success Story. Sarah sat in her car, hands gripping the wheel as if it were the only thing holding her together. The sting of her boss's belittling words echoed in her mind, his derision twisting the knife of self-doubt deeper with every replay. After pouring her heart into the latest project, an endeavor that had consumed her evenings and weekends, she was shocked to discover he barely acknowledged her contribution. "You're not cut out for this," he had said, the threat of dismissal lurking behind his dismissive smile. The fear swelled, terror creeping in as she wondered if this was the end of her journey at Innovotech. The air in Riverton felt heavy with expectation, suffocating ambitions in a sea of uncertainty. She craved validation, desperately desired recognition for her efforts. But her boss's dismissal weighed heavily upon her, igniting an internal war. Should she resign, walk away from a job that had become a part of her identity, or fight back against the relentless tide of condescension? The memories of her late grandfather, a brilliant inventor who never bowed to setbacks, surged to the surface. His tenacity pushed her towards a decision. She would channel her anger into creativity instead of retreating. As days turned into sleepless nights in the local research lab, Sarah pored over blueprints and designs, fueled by a mix of desperation and determination. Each invention she brainstormed became a small victory against the clouds of doubt that threatened to drown her spirit. "Does it even matter?" she asked herself, thinking of the townspeople who relied on Innovotech's success for their livelihoods. Yet with each idea she felt lighter, as if her weight lifted with every patent idea she crudely penned. An unexpected spark arose when Mr. Johnson, the retired engineer, took notice of her struggle. His encouragement proved illuminating. He bestowed old-school engineering wisdom, feeding her confidence during a time when fear threatened to consume her. But those glimmers of confidence were often shattered by an avalanche of internal doubts. Was she really meant for this success? What if her attempts fell flat? As Sarah stood on the brink of submitting her first patent, she overheard colleagues whispering in muted tones about her contributions, dismissing them as insignificant. Each incredulous comment questioned not only her abilities, but her worthiness in an arena where she craved respect. The sting broke against her resolve, leaving her in turmoil. Walking that tightrope between determination and despair, Sarah's mind raced mercilessly. Just as her heart swelled at the thought of her upcoming presentation, her boss issued a chilling ultimatum. She needed his approval to secure her work's future. Would he suffocate her ideas once again? The anchor of her ambition felt heavier than ever as doubt swirled. Did she dare stand up to him, risking everything she had fought to build, or would she swallow her pride and play small? As she grappled with the impending pressure of her presentation, a resolve ignited within her. A tempest of uncertainty wound tightly around her aspirations. What lay ahead was unclear, yet electrifying. The stakes climbed higher as she strained against the facade of control. Sarah stood at an explosive precipice, every moment echoing the weight of broken expectations and tenacious hope. The world outside her grasp felt imposing, and she was ready to confront the harsh reality of rejection that loomed dangerously close. Would she yield to the fear of her voice being silenced, or would she unleash her true potential, prepared to face the fallout of such a choice? As the day of her presentation approached, Sarah's determination morphed into a palpable energy, a mixture of apprehension and anticipation coursing through her veins. Each late-night brainstorming session in the lab transformed from an act of rebellion into a battle cry for validation. The clock on her desk ticked relentlessly, echoing the urgency she felt to assert herself. She could hear Mr. Johnson's words ringing in her ears. The most successful inventors embrace the risk of failure. With that notion stirring inside her, she began shifting her approach. Days blended into sleepless nights where her designs took shape. She meticulously crafted her pitch, honing her arguments, and practicing her delivery until conviction flooded her voice. The sting of her boss's dismissal had given way to a fierce resolve that lit her path forward. Each patent idea transformed into not just an endeavor, but an embodiment of her struggle, an invitation for recognition, but also a declaration of her perseverance. Yet, lurking at the edges of her excitement was the specter of doubt. Each time she envisioned standing before her boss and her peers, her heart raced. Would they see the merit in her work, or would they replicate the dismissiveness she had grown to dread? The images of her colleagues whispering questions about her worthiness shadowed her confidence, stoking the flickering flames of insecurity. In those quiet moments, self-taught engineering principles etched into her heart, reminding her of the importance of resilience, the legacy of her grandfather guiding her steps. By the time the presentation day rolled around, a tempest raged within her, a battle between courage and terror. She arrived at work earlier than usual, revving her mental engines like a race car at the starting line. As she navigated the sterile halls of Innovatech, her stomach twisted with every step, but there was also a spark igniting in her chest. Glass windows framed her reflection, a fleeting moment where she caught a glimpse of the woman she had fought tirelessly to become, a woman who would not shrink beneath another shadow. The conference room buzzed with conversations as colleagues shuffled into their seats. The weight of gazes felt heavy, each pair of eyes scrutinizing her readiness, or perhaps more insidiously, her vulnerability. Sarah took a deep breath and felt the stirrings of a primal instinct urging her to rise. This was more than just presenting patents. It was her declaration to herself and everyone who had doubted. When the time finally came, her heart raced as she approached the podium, notes trembling in her hands. She sensed her boss's condescending gaze from the corner of her eye, reminding her that this was a high-stakes gamble. The weight of expectation bore down on her, a bitter reminder of what had passed. Yet, with every pulse of adrenaline, she envisioned Mr. Johnson's encouraging smile and her grandfather's tenacity, bolstering her spirit. "Today," she began, her voice quaking momentarily before studying, "I stand before you not just as an employee of Innovatech, but as an innovator who has transformed challenges into opportunities." As her words flowed, Sarah felt the tension ease, her mind sharpening with clarity that had felt elusive. She was no longer just fighting the doubts of others, she was embracing her own narrative, claiming her space in an industry that had previously felt foreign. However, just as she began addressing the potential impacts of her patents, she glanced sideways. There was Mr. Andrews, her boss, poised to interrupt, eyes narrowing with disapproval. In that fraction of a moment, she understood. It was either now or never. Would she allow him to silence her again, or would she seize the moment and assert her voice, standing firm against everything that had sought to undermine her success? The choice before her seemed monumental, a divergence in her personal journey, the faint echo of her past punctuating the air. With the dawning realization that the threshold of her professional life teetered in the balance, the moment of truth beckoned. The room felt electric, as if the weight of the moment had conjured a storm of potential. Sarah's heart thundered in her ears, drowning out the whispers that had haunted her for months. Every doubt, every hesitation she had faced in her journey flickered like shadows on the periphery of her mind. This was her arena, and she was ready to fight. As she gazed at the faces in the room, some skeptical, others curious, determination surged within her. Mr. Andrews shifted in his seat, his posture draped in the familiar air of condescension. But today, she wasn't going to allow his disdain to clip her wings. Taking a deep breath, she allowed the energy to fuel her words. "Let's talk about innovation. Let's discuss how any great invention is born from a need, a challenge faced head-on." With each slide she presented, confidence grew, like a fire stoked to life. Her innovations one by one came alive on the screen, solutions addressing real-world issues with elegant designs that balanced function and visual appeal. It wasn't just about patents anymore, it was proof of her capability and conviction wrapped into every diagram and model she displayed. When she reached the climax of her presentation, detailing the potential applications and marketability of her ideas, she noticed the initial resolve in her colleagues beginning to shift. Nods appeared, subtle at first, but they solidified into expressions of interest. All the late nights, the relentless revisions, and the hours spent troubleshooting. Her designs swirled into clarity. Her work had purpose, a purpose that couldn't be dismissed. But as she neared the end, Mr. Andrews leaned forward. His body language cruelly reminded her of her past vulnerability. "Interesting, Sarah. But have you considered the reality of implementation?" His words dripped with skepticism, like venom meant to undermine her triumph. The moment crackled in the air. She could feel the pendulum swing in favor of her past, that anxiety, that fear of inadequacy. But she wasn't the same woman who had faced his ridicule before. There was something new in her. Sarah took a step closer to the edge of the podium, locking eyes with him. Implementation isn't just about feasibility, it's about determination and vision. I've watched great ideas fail because of a lack of belief. But today, you're looking at someone who believes unequivocally in her work. The silence that followed was palpable, as if the room held its breath. She detected the shift, not just in the atmosphere, but within herself. By standing her ground, asserting her value, she had peeled back layers of self-doubt that had once stifled her growth. She finally understood that victory lay not only in her patents, but in confronting the fears that threatened to suppress her. Mr. Johnson, who had been listening intently, finally spoke up, cutting through the tension. "Sarah, your passion is commendable. No doubt, innovation thrives on that fuel. But can your concepts withstand the scrutiny of our stakeholders?" The question hung in the air, like a weighty challenge, but instead of crumbling, she felt an invigorating rush pool in her stomach. "Absolutely," she replied, feeling the surge of adrenaline pushing her forward. "I welcome the scrutiny. If there is a chance to refine and strengthen these ideas further, then let's embark on that journey together." The shift was monumental. She had shifted from a place of defense to one of collaboration. Her propositions morphed from mere presentations of patent applications into an exploration of possibilities, an invitation for dialogue. As the meeting adjourned, murmurs filled the room. Colleagues walked up, sharing their thoughts, expressing enthusiasm in ways she had never experienced before. Each positive interaction further fueled a growing realization within her. She had transformed, not just her presentation, but also her standing. However, as she gathered her notes, she spotted Mr. Andrews retreating towards the door, a glint of calculation in his eyes. The battle had been fought, but a nagging uncertainty gnawed at her. Had she really convinced him, or was this merely the prelude to a greater confrontation lurking in the shadows? Caught between elation and apprehension, Sarah knew her journey was far from over. The real test awaited, potentially orchestrated by those who had dismissed her from the beginning. With this thought, she couldn't shake the feeling. What would be the true cost of proving her worth? It was time to prepare for the next phase of her transformation. Sarah sat at her desk, the glow of her computer screen casting a soft blue light across the room. Her thoughts drifted between the exhilaration of her presentation and the unsettling prospect of a confrontation with Mr. Andrews. He was known for his sharp tongue and sharper mind. Yet what resonated in Sarah's mind wasn't fear, but a budding strategy. To win this battle, she needed a thorough understanding of the intricacies involved, not just in her ideas, but in the machination of those around her. Folding her hands, she took a moment to regroup. The adrenaline from the meeting slowly faded, replaced by a resolve that felt stronger than ever. This was no longer just about patents. This was a pivotal moment in her career, a leader's challenge. She needed to think critically about how to approach her next steps strategically. She began mapping out a plan, breaking it down into manageable tasks. First, understanding her colleagues' perspectives. She needed allies in this endeavor, individuals who believed in innovation as passionately as she did. Collaborating with them could enhance her ideas and present a united front during discussions about implementation. Each person's expertise could turn her concepts from fledgling ideas into robust proposals with cross-disciplinary insights. She pulled open her sketchbook, filled with diagrams and iterations of her designs. It was time to refine her patents with an emphasis not just on their features, but on the impact they would have within the market. As the whirring of her mind continued, she began drafting emails.
reaching out to colleagues who had shown interest and those who might offer constructive criticism. Yet, alongside this collaborative push, there was still the undeniable specter of Mr. Andrews lurking in the shadows of doubt. Sarah knew that conversations with stakeholders would come with scrutiny, and she had to be prepared for his inevitable challenges. His expertise wasn't merely a hurdle, it was also an opportunity, a chance to evolve her proposal and make it stronger. Armed with her sketches, she crafted a presentation that not only highlighted her innovations, but also included slides dedicated to addressing potential implementation concerns. She focused on real-world applications, cost analysis, and projected timelines. Each element strengthened her resolve. This time, she wouldn't leave the room presenting just ideas. She would showcase action and practicality. Throughout her preparation, she felt the flickering thrill of independence replace previous self-doubt. This transformation wasn't just professional, it was personal. She was shedding layers of vulnerability like a snake in the sun. With each passing hour, she could sense the shift. She was no longer a passive participant in her career, waiting for recognition. Instead, she was becoming a proactive architect of her destiny. As Sarah gathered her research into a cohesive narrative, she could visualize her next meeting, the way she would articulate her ideas, the intensity of her eyes as she addressed the board. But within her excitement, a shadow of uncertainty remained, an uninvited guest dancing at the edges of her thoughts. What if Mr. Andrews found a flaw she hadn't anticipated? The question lingered like static in the moment she finished her revisions, a notification pinged on her phone. It was an email from Mr. Johnson, inviting her for a follow-up discussion regarding her proposal formalizing potential next steps. The weight of it settled on her shoulders. This could either secure her position or unravel her progress. Heart racing, she prepared herself for what could be a pivotal moment, a battleground of minds where ideas would clash and only the most prepared would survive. The real scrutiny was about to begin. Would she emerge from this renewed confrontation victorious, or would it expose her vulnerabilities in a way that felt irrevocable? Sarah knew she had to be ready. What lay ahead could be either her greatest triumph or her most profound setback. The stage was set, and she was about to step into a dialogue that would force her to confront not just the ideas she had crafted, but the very essence of who she had become. Clenching her jaw, she whispered to herself, "Bring it on." A determination coursed through her veins. The real battle for her worth was just beginning. As she took a deep breath, Sarah closed her laptop, the urgency of the upcoming meeting thickening the air around her. The narrative she had constructed was clear in her mind. She wasn't just defending her ideas, she was demonstrating their value. Yet beneath her composed exterior, she felt a twist of anxiety. Her ambition was intertwining with trepidation. What if her best wasn't good enough? Determined to manage her nerves, Sarah ran through her mental checklist of strategies. She visualized each slide of her presentation and anticipated questions like a chess player envisioning multiple moves ahead. The goal wasn't solely to present, it was to engage, to draw in both Mr. Andrews and the rest of the board as allies instead of adversaries. The thought ignited a flicker of eagerness. Her phone buzzed again, breaking her concentration. A quick glance revealed a message from Jessica, her most trusted colleague. "Got your back today. Let's go in prepared." The affirmation from Jessica was a balm, refocusing Sarah's thoughts. Engaging allies was crucial, and every bit of support reinforced her decision-making process. Reflection led her to realize her journey was not solely about asserting her ideas, but about uniting a diverse range of perspectives under the banner of innovation. As she moved toward the meeting room, Sarah felt the tension like a guitar string pulled taut. Her heart pounded in sync. This was more than a presentation. It was a culmination of her experiences, her evolution from a hesitant contributor to a resolute innovator. It had taken months of dedication, countless late nights sketching designs, and dialogue with those she had once viewed with trepidation. The conference room door loomed ahead, and she paused for a moment, allowing a surge of confidence to wash over her. Having identified her vulnerabilities meant she was already stepping ahead of the potential pitfalls. If Mr. Andrews questioned her, she would respond not with defensiveness, but
curiosity had the potential to breed collaboration. Inside the room, the atmosphere was charged with a competitive edge. A sea of faces greeted her, eyes glinting with expectations. Mr. Johnson sat at the forefront, while Mr. Andrews loomed slightly back, his expression inscrutable. Sarah set her laptop on the table, feeling the weight of their attention. She launched into her presentation, her voice steady as she laid the groundwork for her concepts. As the visuals transitioned seamlessly, Sarah could sense her colleagues nodding, some leaning in, intrigued by the possibilities unfolding before them. But then came the moment she knew would arrive, the inevitable challenge from Mr. Andrews. "While your concepts are interesting, I'm struggling to see how they integrate with our existing technologies," he interjected, a slight smirk dancing at the corners of his mouth. Rather than folding under his scrutiny, Sarah felt the grip of her confidence tighten. "I appreciate your concern," she replied, confronting him rather than recoiling. "In fact, I anticipated this and included a comparative analysis showing synergies that align closely with our tech." She flipped to the slide she had prepared, eyes burning with determination as she outlined potential collaborations and barriers. The exchange sparked questions from others, and soon the room transformed into a dynamic discussion. Mr. Andrews was no longer a threat, but part of the dialogue, and in that moment, Sarah recognized her growth. She was capable of reshaping the narrative. As the conversation deepened, an unexpected realization struck her like lightning. She wasn't just pitching patents, she was redefining her professional identity. The thrill of discovery coursed through her. This confrontation was not merely about ideas, it was a testament to her newfound resilience and strategic thinking. As laughter erupted and debates flourished, Sarah fought to stem her excitement. The self-imposed boundaries she had once lived within were beginning to dissolve. The meeting ended on a promising note, but uncertainty lingered in the air like smoke. Feedback would follow soon, and she still had to navigate the evaluation from upper management. Yet, as she walked out, a curious thought echoed in her mind. If today had been successful, what new barriers would she face in her next challenge? Would she be able to maintain this momentum, or would doubts crash upon her once again? With her heart racing, she prepared for what might come next, aware that the true test of her transformation awaited just around the corner. The days following the meeting felt like an intricate dance, with Sarah navigating between enthusiasm and a simmering anxiety that threatened to pull her back into doubt. The dialogue had been invigorating, and her colleagues' engagement specked an infectious energy. Yet, as the days stretched on, she couldn't shake the sense that this victory, however meaningful, was merely the prologue to a larger story, one that required further unraveling. Her phone pinged with an email, a brief note from Mr. Johnson, applauding her presentation but encouraging a deeper exploration of the integration of her ideas with their existing technologies.
Frameworks. His words were encouraging, yet they tugged at her insatiable need for clarity. If she were to cement her position as an innovator, she needed to not only demonstrate her concepts, but also articulate their seamless connection to the company's core. The pressure was palpable, and she felt the initial tremors of doubt creeping in again. With renewed determination, Sarah carved out time each evening for research, poring over case studies and exploring the cutting-edge technologies relevant to her proposals. Each revelation felt like adding brushstrokes to a canvas. She needed a comprehensive masterpiece rather than a collection of sketches. She unearthed something interesting, a study on what had failed in the past and why. It ignited a stark realization: failure was often a precursor to innovation, and every misstep led to necessary adaptations. Would she, too, harness her challenges as stepping stones? Encouraged by this perspective, she met with Jessica to brainstorm more. Sitting across from her at a vibrant cafe, Sarah shared her latest findings. What if we presented a detailed report that illustrates each proposed patent's synergies with our current projects? It could address Mr. Johnson's concerns directly and showcase our proactive strategies. Jessica leaned in, her eyes sparkling with interest. Absolutely, and let's make sure to highlight previous failures. Those are lessons learned, after all. Ignoring them sets us up for complacency. As they built out their ideas, a plan began to coalesce, one that turned past failures into crucial elements of their narrative. They would illustrate a forward-thinking methodology that not only respected the company's history, but also carved a new path. But just as Sarah was ready to present her preliminary findings to the management team, another email landed in her inbox. This time it was from Mr. Andrews, blunt and to the point. Your enthusiasm is noted, but remember, our company values successful integration over mere concepts. Back up your ideas with quantifiable evidence of their performance potential. The words hit her like a cold wave. Was he challenging her ambition? Testing her resolve? Determined not to falter, she gathered all the metrics she could find. Late nights morphed into early mornings as she dove headfirst into data analysis, searching for a way to bridge the gap between idea and execution. Each statistic became a lifeline, pulling her away from the clutches of self-doubt. She began to sense a stirring within herself. The deeper her knowledge, the more equipped she felt to confront whoever opposed her. The upcoming meeting felt like the pivotal moment she had been preparing for. It would be a true test of her resolve and her newly forged skills. As she practiced her presentation, the energy in the room became tangible. She envisioned the charts, the figures, and the exclamatory conversations with the board. It wasn't just about defending her ideas anymore. She was learning to wield data like a weapon. But lurking behind her newfound certainty was a nagging thought. Would her efforts be enough to satisfy the scrutiny of upper management? Could she withstand the pressure of not only defending her concepts, but also managing the expectations of her colleagues? The day before the presentation, she experienced an unshakable moment of doubt. Could she really convince them? Would the weight of rejection overwhelm her? As Sarah stood on the precipice of another challenge, she confronted the immense vulnerability that came with growth, the desire to prove herself tempered with the fear of failure. As these complexities settled in her mind, one question burned brightly. What if clinging to her past strengths could become her greatest asset in the face of impending scrutiny? The answer to that question awaited her, just beyond the horizon of her next presentation. As Sarah awoke the morning of her presentation, the sunlight flooded her bedroom, illuminating the remnants of her late-night preparations. The notes scattered across her desk, the meticulously arranged charts, and the energy drink cans offering silent testimonies to her dedication. She felt the weight of expectation coiling around her, a physical pressure that was both familiar and foreign, as if it were a second skin she hadn't anticipated putting on. Her morning routine became a mental rehearsal. Each movement, a sip of coffee, the act of tying her shoes, felt like a ritual, designed to ground her in reality as her mind careened through the potential outcomes of the meeting ahead. She pondered each slide, each data point, attempting to find clarity in the chaos of ideas whirling inside her head. The planned narrative began to form, but doubt shadowed it and demanded acknowledgement. In the mirror, Sarah caught herself running through her presentation in whispers, rehearsing her intonation and body language, each gesture carefully synchronized with her words. Yet, beneath her composure, an internal debate unfolded. Was she merely a vessel for the ideas crafted through hard work, or was she meant to embody those concepts, bringing them to life with her passion and insight? The latter felt truer, but it also guaranteed vulnerability, a risk that potentially exposed her to criticism. Arriving at the office, the atmosphere buzzed with a charged energy that enveloped Sarah like a fog. Colleagues scurried around, focused on their own tasks, hardly aware of the storm brewing within her. In that moment, she recognized a choice: to either shrink beneath the weight of expectations or harness it as fuel for her performance. She chose the latter, deliberately straightening her back and absorbing the palpable tension. Once inside the conference room, seated among board members and upper management, Sarah's heart raced. She could already feel Mr. Andrews's scrutinizing gaze, a reminder of the challenge he had thrown her way. She began her presentation, channeling everything she had researched, every late-night epiphany. As she clicked through the slides, she transformed statistical data into compelling stories, illustrating how their past hurdles shaped opportunities for growth, and how the patents she proposed could innovate the very fabric of their operations. The dialogue shifted, questions emerged, challenging and persuasive, each one igniting a spark of adrenaline within her. Sarah recalibrated her approach, finding strength in her knowledge. With each response, she wove in anecdotes of revisiting past failures, emphasizing the lessons embedded within, turning what was once a point of shame into a cornerstone of her argument. She could see the flickers of understanding, even among skeptics, and that empowered her. But halfway through, Mr. Andrews interrupted, brow furrowed. "While I appreciate your passion, can you quantify the potential return on these investments? We need to see numbers, Sarah." A wave of uncertainty washed over her like ice water, but instead of folding under the pressure, she drew on her earlier preparation. She had anticipated this moment. "Certainly, if I may direct your attention to this next slide." Her voice steadied as she presented not just metrics, but projections, data-driven insights that painted a feasible future. The atmosphere shifted once more. She was no longer chasing acceptance, but confidently steering the conversation towards shared goals. Finally, as she concluded, silence spilled across the room, a heavy pause thick with anticipation. Had she crossed the finish line or merely begun her race? As glances exchanged between her audience, the tension lingered. Sarah could feel their deliberation, as if it were a tangible force. Waiting for affirmation weighed heavier than any sense of accomplishment she'd felt throughout the presentation. Mr. Johnson spoke first, his tone contemplative. "Impressive work, Sarah. Your integration of quantitative data lends credibility to your proposals. We'll discuss this further." As she stepped out of the conference room, the rush of adrenaline did not dissipate. It surged within her, igniting a newfound sense of purpose. She realized she had transformed not just her ideas, but herself. Yet knowing the path to genuine success made her pulse quicken with urgency. What if this was only a glimpse of her potential? The real challenge awaited, proving to herself and others that innovation demanded both courage and clarity. With each step she took, certainty replaced hesitation. The journey to harness her voice as an innovator had just begun. What unseen obstacles lay ahead, ready to test her resolve once more? As the adrenaline settled into a low hum within her, Sarah realized that the gravity of her journey had only just begun. The whisper of excitement was quickly shadowed by an all-too-familiar wave of apprehension swirling in her stomach. The validation from Mr. Johnson was only the beginning, a fleeting moment of approval amidst the longer path of scrutiny and demand that lay ahead. Back at her desk, surrounded by colleagues who were at once oblivious and acutely aware of her recent performance, she opened her laptop to review her notes from the meeting again. The familiar rush of ideas began to course through her veins, yet now tangled with a fear of falling short of expectations. What if she couldn't build on this momentum? What if the praise wasn't a sign of merit, but merely a momentary distraction from her underlying uncertainties? Still, there was a flicker of resolve within her, urging her to dissect the presentation with an analytical eye. Each slide, each statistic dissected, she analyzed the moments when doubt drifted into her confidence. The questions Mr. Andrews posed haunted her. They served as a haunting reminder of the razor-thin line between acceptance and condemnation. The feeling that her qualifications could crumble under the pressure of expectation was suffocating. Butterflies in her stomach morphed into an avalanche of self-criticism. Suddenly, the urgency to refine her ideas sharpened. She pulled up the earlier projections and challenged herself to expand upon them. Hidden within those figures lay the potential for innovation. She had to dig deep and unearth not only what could be done, but how her vision aligned with the company's future, not just as a series of patents, but as a compelling narrative that drove the organization further.
Days turned into an incessant cycle of research, experimentation, and late nights. She navigated through industry journals, connecting with mentors who understood the labyrinth of innovation from experience. Every conversation was a building block that fortified her confidence, but also exposed her naivete. With each interaction, she faced moments that chipped away at her view of herself. Was she truly capable, or was she simply a player in someone else's play? At times during discussions, she felt the prying eyes of superiors looming over her. The questions tackled her with relentless force. Some were supportive, yet many felt laden with hidden judgments. "Why haven't we seen the ROI on your suggestion, Sarah?" echoed in her mind, a searing reminder that she needed to fortify her capabilities, both mentally and strategically. Through the darkness of doubt, a spark ignited within her, a revelation born not of fear but possibility. She realized she possessed assets deeper than data-driven insights. Her own story, flawed yet rich with lessons, could serve as a foundation for convictions that breathed life into her proposals. However, this meant stepping past the threshold of comfort and confronting her narrative. That weekend brought an unexpected phone call from a former colleague evangelizing the potential impact of story in business. "It's the heart of innovation, Sarah," he insisted. "You need to articulate the why behind your ideas, not just the what." Her pulse quickened. The concept sat heavy yet liberating in her consciousness. Her own journey, filled with failures and triumphs, became a critical element in redefining her proposals. The realization struck her. She would not just present her patents to the board. She would open up a dialogue infused with authenticity, illuminating her path and vision. In the days leading up to the next presentation, Sarah began drafting her narrative, piecing together her story and intertwining the factual data seamlessly. She felt like an artist, sculpting something tangible from her experience. Yet her heart remained heavy with apprehension. What if her story fell flat? Would she still be scrutinized? As she walked into the conference room, her heart raced, not with fear, but with a fierce determination that coursed through her veins. She took a deep breath, ready to lace her triumphs with vulnerability, inviting her audience into the folds of her journey. But just as she began, a familiar face appeared at the door.
Mr. Andrews, a stern look etched across his features. The moment of confrontation lingered in the air, a challenge that sought to deter her newly kindled enthusiasm. As she prepared to face her audience, she understood this was more than a presentation. It was her moment to redefine expectations, not just theirs, but her own. The real question awaited. Would she embrace her narrative and confidently expose her vulnerabilities, or would she retreat behind the shield of data, afraid of being truly seen? Feeling the salty tang of sweat start to beat at her temples, Sarah shifted her weight from one foot to the other, battling the tension in her chest. Mr. Andrews' presence seemed like a shadow that darkened her bright intentions. She had rehearsed this moment countless times, yet now, with his scrutinizing gaze fixed firmly on her, her mind wavered. A siren call of doubt sang through the back of her head. But the moment held a different kind of magic, a peculiar power. She glanced around the conference room, each face lit with anticipation, some expectation, others skepticism. The stakes were set high, but her resolve felt indomitable. "Today," she started, her voice steadier than expected, "isn't just about the numbers. It's about the story that drives those numbers." Taking a breath, she forged ahead with everything she had crafted during her sleepless nights of drafting, redefining, and refining. She began to weave her narrative into the presentation, aiming to captivate her audience not merely with cold, hard facts, but with the beating heart behind her ideas. Every slide pivoted, painting not just how her patents could add to the bottom line, but why they mattered. Stories about each trial and triumph like threads stitching her experience into a coherent tapestry. She shared the moments of frustration, the late-night revelations, the conversations that sparked creativity even in dire conditions. As word shapes formed and danced into life, she watched as the previously skeptical faces among her colleagues began to shift. Intrigue replaced apprehension.
Nods of understanding replaced vacant stares. She could feel the nuances of her story settling in, roots taking hold. Yet, Mr. Andrews remained unmoved, piercing through her enthusiasm with a sharp question when there was a pause. But, what evidence do you have that any of this will translate into real-world application? His voice was unyielding, each syllable a dagger dipped in condescension. Her pulse quickened. How was it that after all this effort, one question could ricochet through her mind with such devastating impact? It burned at the recesses of her self-doubt, reigniting the fears she had triumphed over earlier. She forced herself to calmness. "I realize the importance of metrics," she countered, meeting his gaze head-on, "but innovation starts with risk, the guts to challenge the status quo, to carve out our path. What I'm proposing could lay the foundation for a resilient future." Briefly, she felt a swell of power, a connection with the story she had created, a narrative not just imagined, but lived. Yet a gnawing urge gripped.
Did her conviction resonate authentically, or was it merely a momentary illusion? Could she risk everything on her own story, trusting it to take her further? The presentation wrapped up, and the air buzzed with cautious curiosity. She could see colleagues whispering to one another, parsing their opinions, tossing her ideas into a web of scrutiny. Sarah's heart swelled and sank at the same time, an anxious thrill mixed with a dread that she had crossed a precipice without knowing if she'd fly or fall. As she looked back at Mr. Andrews, the resolve on her face tempered by uncertainty, she felt a sudden awareness wash over her. This wasn't the end, merely a beginning cloaked in challenge. The fateful questions still lingered in her mind. Had she carved out a space for herself in this room, or was she risking it all? Just as the meeting closed, Mr. Andrews turned toward her, his expression inscrutable. "We'll discuss this more in depth later. I hope you're ready for the questions that follow, because this is just the start of the conversation about innovation." The weight of his words settled heavily on her shoulders as she realized that the true challenge had only begun. It was not merely about one presentation. It was a clarion call to a deeper engagement she would need to uphold. What lay beyond that door seemed vast and uncertain, shadows lurking with questions yet unanswered. How would she navigate this new landscape of doubt and determination? As Sarah stepped from the conference room, the pulse of uncertainty echoed in her chest. Would she rise to meet the challenges ahead, or permit them to erode her hard-won newfound clarity? In that moment of indecision, she understood one thing. She would not hide behind her narrative, nor retreat into obscurity. The time had come to face the discomfort head-on, come what may. The weeks after her presentation became a crucible for Sarah, a period where her resolve was tested repeatedly, pushing her past limits she once deemed insurmountable. Breaking through the confines of her initial aspirations, she discovered strength she had not realized existed within her. The company responded to her proposals with cautious interest, sparking discussions that ignited a newfound sense of belonging within Innovatech. Each meeting felt less like an examination and more like an open dialogue, shifting her perspective from one of defense to collaboration. She implemented her findings from the feedback received, refining her concepts into actionable plans that translated theoretical ideas into quantifiable outcomes. Sarah started to view every setback not as failure, but as an essential chapter in her evolution, a vital step in mastering the intricate dance between creativity and pragmatism, a duality that defined successful innovation. With each iteration of her proposals, the tension that once gripped her slowly transformed into confidence. One late evening, while sifting through the myriad of suggestions from colleagues who began to see her as a partner rather than just another cog in the machine, Sarah drafted her latest update on the patent proposals. The image of her grandfather became a vivid motivator, his legacy of perseverance resonating deeply as she recalled his own journey of inventiveness. She could almost hear his voice. Innovation requires tenacity. It was during one of the final meetings that she presented her reworked proposal that would prove pivotal. The air in the conference room thrummed with anticipation, but unlike before, Sarah felt a calmness wash over her.
Today, she stated clearly, I want to showcase how our innovations can not only redefine the products we offer, but create a new pathway for our market presence. She adopted a tone that mingled authority with warmth, unlike the timorous apprehension she wore in the past. Each slide she advanced portrayed not just her patents, but outlined a strategic plan that showcased synergy with existing innovations within the company. She encapsulated data that demonstrated potential ROI while weaving in anecdotes that reflected her journey, how challenges shaped her professionally but also personally. As she concluded the presentation, a notable change rippled through the room. The skepticism that had once clouded her interactions with Mr. Andrews began to lift, replaced by curiosity and engagement. This time he leaned forward, eyes gleaming, inviting discussion rather than oppressing it. Sarah, he said, his tone shifting, you've stepped up significantly. Clearly, your analysis connects with our strategic goals. But the question remains, how do we commercialize these ideas effectively? Instead of feeling cornered, Sarah embraced the inquiry. I believe that effective commercialization starts with embracing our narrative. By framing our innovations not only through technical specs, but also through stories that resonate with our audience, like mine, we can create a brand narrative that stands out. The dialogue that unfolded was animated, a lively exchange where her colleagues rallied around her vision. The acknowledgement of her expertise blossomed like spring flowers, shyly poking through the winter's frost. Even Mr. Andrews participated robustly, his challenges now framed as opportunities for deeper inquiry, a marked contrast from their previous interactions. As the meeting adjourned, Sarah walked out feeling a mix of elation and disbelief. She had experienced a metamorphosis, shedding layers of self-doubt that had stifled her potential for far too long. Not only had she conquered the fears that had plagued her, but she had also positioned herself as a vital contributor to Innovatech, no longer an afterthought, but rather an indispensable part of the company's future. Months later, standing at a company-wide conference where her patents were publicly recognized as foundational to a new product line, Sarah beamed with pride. The applause that erupted was not just a celebration of her innovative ideas, but of her transformation. Her journey was complete, woven with threads of struggle, resilience, and ultimate achievement. She had taken the threat of resignation and transformed it into 5 incredible patents, each representing not just inventions, but personal victories. In that moment, with the weight of acknowledgement resting upon her shoulders, Sarah understood the profound lesson that had shaped her. True success is born from within, an unyielding belief in oneself, tempered by the fires of adversity. Now, I urge you to take a bold step in your own journey. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and support powerful narratives of personal transformation. Comment your reactions and theories about Sarah's extraordinary journey, and engage with a community that values growth and resilience. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion, because true fans of personal overcoming stories understand the importance of supporting this channel through these actions. This is the moment to show your support. Don't wait even one more second to share. Be part of a legacy that inspires and empowers.